Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Jett. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I love that basically almost this entire episode took place over the course of basically a weekend, and so much shit went down. Let's break it down, some of the stuff. Obviously, there's a whole thing with Jett and Charlie having their fun times, or their fun and sexy times, and it's like, woo! I love that it cuts back to Carl and Bennie playing chess, and I just love that conversation with Carl being like, hey, come on, that's not fair. I mean, it's like you got all these mathematicians who make this whole thing up of certain pieces can move two spaces are straightforward or bad or an L shape or whatever, and then they're like, what did they do when they got to the queen? They were like, fuck it, this bitch can move anyway. And it's just, I love it because it's like, right, you never really think about how crazy powerful, just in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of like everyone's got their specific pattern, and you just have the queen being like, yeah, I can move anywhere on the damn board I want to. So it's just kind of interesting to me in that regard. So I just thought that was such a funny conversation because I just hadn't even, I guess you just never think about that sometimes, but nevertheless, breaking that down like that, there's also just like Charlie and Jett spending time together. I love Jett kind of having it covered, like the whole bullet wound situation. Well, she's like, oh yeah, because like Charlie keeps, asking stuff about her past, and I wonder, was there some truth to that? Because that's always the thing about, designing a lie. Add in bits of the truth. That way it's less for you to have to remember, and also it seems less like a lie if you do add in the truth, because it's like, oh, like it makes it truthful enough that it's not something you have to completely made up. It's what I'm trying to get at. But I just thought it was kind of interesting. She's basically trying to associate her wound to sleepwalking. It's like, and I also love the well-placed camera angles, and not just camera angles, but just things in general covering Carla Gugino's body. Let's just leave it at that. And I was like, oh, that's interesting placement. And it's just like, okay. I think it's just because I'm not still used to DM'd Cinemax. I guess because I watch so much like cable television that, when HBO and Cinemax, even Stars, kind of push the limit, stuff like that kind of catches me off guard because I'm just not used to it. So it's just funny to me. I'm like, oh wow. I was like, don't forget, you're watching Cinemax. But nevertheless, it's interesting too to learn that Charlie is kind of a bit of a religious dude, because Jett doesn't really kind of give too much weight to it all, but the thing that Charlie is, to the point that he will even go oh yeah, he knows that if there is such thing as some form of retribution, that it'll come towards him, and he'll deserve it. So interesting things also about Jett too is learn, because we know that she got pregnant 7 years ago. We kind of saw that when she kind of found out she was pregnant, and that's when she actually first met Maria. But we ended up finding out she actually gave birth to Alice in prison. And it's kind of interesting because her and Maria kind of had that whole conversation about how it was going to go down. Like, she might be handcuffed after she gives birth or during. In her case, it ended up being a case of being during, because it also depends on the prison. But it's like, obviously, if she'll get 24 hours with the baby, then some social worker will come and get the baby, put the baby in the system. And so that was interesting. So, because I was curious about it. I was like, oh, so has Jett only been in prison 2 or 3 years? I don't think they expressly ever explained how long she was in jail. I think even in this episode, not unless I missed it, I don't think they've ever even explained why she was in jail. But what was interesting, though, is it seems like she's been in jail all of Alice's life. I wonder, did Maria tell her about her mom the entire time, or was it a circumstance of... Well, because there was another part of me that's like, I feel like it wouldn't be, because I was starting to think, could it be a situation of, she's been to jail multiple times? But I'm thinking, it's all one stint of, her being in jail those 4-6 years. We got the later 2 years where she met Phoenix, but there's still that other 4 years that's kind of okay, so what's up with that? But I do kind of think it's interesting that we are kind of knowing Jett present day. We get bits and pieces of her past, obviously everything associated with her, Jackie Blair, and the whole Sweeney situation, and you get little bits here and there, her story's kind of told you, present day everything's in order, but her past is very out of order. It's just kind of scrambled how we get it. I just think it's kind of aesthetically interesting how we get that perspective. But yeah, Maria pretended to be a social worker, ended up getting Alice, and I guess that's where that kind of started at. So that was kind of interesting. But that's what I was, like I said, was wondering. That's why I guess like the whole motherhood thing kind of seems a little weird and awkward for Jett. Because I was thinking like, oh, it must be something that's still not 100% good to her. With her, it's like, no, because she literally spent all of Alice's life behind bars pretty much, which is interesting. Literally gave birth to her behind bars. But I just thought that was kind of an interesting scene to kind of get background to that. She returns home and sees Phoenix there. You know, it's kind of neat in a way. It's kind of like, yo, it's like three ladies and a baby type of situation. But it's just neat to kind of see like this family growing. It's like, oh, you got Jett, you got Phoenix, you got Maria and Alice, and it's just, I don't know, it's nice. And Phoenix is like, the fact of the matter is, I'm finished with my debt to my brother. We'll get to that soon enough. But I also love the whole fact is that she's like, when it's all said and done, like, but nevertheless, I kind of got distracted into something. The point I was making, I was like, where was I at? Phoenix being like, hey, I can be here, I can drop Alice off to school, I can do this, I can take Maria to her treatments, I can cut the lawn, I can take care of the chickens, even though I know you don't have chickens. It's like, and Jed's like, how long were you practicing that speech? She's like, I did like 2, maybe 3 times. Does it sound rushed? And you know, basically it's like, okay, if we're gonna, you know, be this big family, we're gonna need a bigger house and everything. You kind of get Maria's kind of nod like, yeah, I think, you know, Maria likes Phoenix too. So I just thought that was kind of neat. But kind of circling back to Phoenix's thing, she goes back to her place, sees this toss. I'm like, oh, what the hell is this? Turns out it was her brother, because basically the dudes they turned down last episode, in particular Phoenix turned down those college students or whatever. Well, it turns out one of them's got like kind of like a mobster uncle or whatever. Basically, he got roughed up. And, you know, but obviously Phoenix is like, I'm done with your shit. Here's the money. I'm done. And it's so twisted how her brother is. He's like, the fact of the matter is, I don't want you to leave. You know, how much it hurts me to see you kind of like on a bed, some dude coming on your tits and stuff like that. It's like, Jesus. And he's talking about like, oh, the fact of the matter is, you know, I'm not saying that this is what you like. What was it he's saying? That this is all there is to you? That this is... I forgot what the exact wording he used, but it was kind of like, I'm not saying that this is your calling, but it's something that you're good at. And he's just talking about the fact is, I took you in, like I gave you this situation and everything, blah blah blah. Basically, like I took care of you. And he's like, you remember this moment, kind of reminiscing about something. It pisses her off. She headbutts him. It's like, you are the scummiest brother in the world, like mad disgusting. You're literally pimping out your sister. And he's trying to be like, oh, it's not, you know, I didn't want it. Like, he's almost trying to put her into one to be like, this is kind of all your fault. I just kind of went along with it. It's like, oh, okay. So, but luckily Phoenix gets away from that situation. So, because she's trying to save up enough money to go back to school, because going to school is expensive. So there's that. Jett meets up with Evans. It's like, yo, got some good news. You get to keep some of that stuff. You get to keep like what he said, like 400. I'm assuming that's supposed to be like 400,000. Could be wrong, but I'm assuming so. And it's like, okay, so it's like, okay, what's the bad news? It's like, actually, I'm nothing but good news today. So turns out there's a new job. We also learned that Jett has to do 3 more jobs for Bestic. Next one is this. It's basically stealing was it a Maserati? Stealing that. She's got to piece together her own crew. Like, obviously, she gets a little more leeway. And Evans is like, I told you, nothing but good news today. So that in itself is interesting. We didn't really get too much of a look at that, but I'm sure, like, next episode we might get more insight into that job and seeing her kind of building up her crew and just kind of seeing how she plans to handle the job. So that's going to be interesting. Along with all of that, we also have this situation with Jackie kind of caught between Josie and his wife Helen. Josie sent him that sexy text, which we know, like, she brought that up last episode, being like, I'm gonna text you like some some filthy stuff like once a day or whatever. And interestingly enough, it kept bothering me the entire time. I was like, where do I recognize the actress who plays Helen? I could be wrong about this, because I've seen that actress in plenty of things, but I think the most recent thing, and the reason why she's clearer in my head, I want to say that's the actress who played Wagner, Dr. Wagner, you know, Parker's mom on Charmed, the 2018 one. So that's what I'm thinking. I think that might be the same actress. I could be wrong. But it's interesting to hear the whole conversation, because obviously, like, he's trying to meet up with Josie, but his wife is kind of like, she doesn't want them to have the same relationship as, like, her best friend, because it's like her best friend is thinking she thinks that her best friend's husband is cheating on her, and it's like, I don't want us to be like that, and the whole, like, blowjob conversation, and it's like, whoa, like, I'm gonna work on my gag-free fuck, so I'm like, whoa. Okay, those type of conversation are going down. It seems like Jackie's kind of disinterested, but now he's kind of caught between a little rock and a hard place. I even loved her picking up the phone, being like, "Yeah, he's busy right now. He'll call you back," and hangs up. And it was Josie calling, and it's kind of weird and awkward. She was following Bobby, who was with Junior, who was also with Solace at church. Solace at church, and then it's like she gets busted. Junior's kind of a little, Turns out Junior's actually pretty smart because he figures out Tiffany's a cop. I mean, to be fair, his dad being who he is, the fact of the matter is they have their long history of living in this world. It's like, Bobby, the fact of the matter is you're new to this whole situation. The fact of the matter is I've lived in this life. Bobby's kind of looking at him like, you're a little crazy, you're out of your mind. But once again, Junior's pretty smart. I don't know if they've necessarily figured out that, like, oh, Bobby's phone has been messed up. I guess maybe they're not tracking it right now, so they might not have noticed. I don't know. Or maybe they found some other way of tracking him now, so maybe they don't just need the phone anymore. I thought that was kind of the main thing. But the conversation never came up about it, so maybe that was something kind of handled off screen. Maybe it's going to be something to tackle next episode. It's interesting because, Josie is kind of like wanting to get Bobby out of the situation because it's like, yeah, he's smart. You said he's crazy, but he's not stupid. Doesn't she actually kind of work because she sees how much of a nice guy Bobby is, so she doesn't actually want him to become a victim in this situation. But Jackie says the whole, like, don't let that you being all sentimental about this kind of get in the way of the whole case. I'm foreshadowing that it's kind of like she's going to try and get Bobby out of this, and Junior's going to end up killing her because of it. I just get that feeling, like it just seems like it's foreshadowing a lot of that. It could be wrong, but we'll see. Obviously, all things are in all paradise between Josie and Jackie, because it's the whole thing of, like, the fact is, she doesn't want to just be that other woman. It just makes her feel, because it's like, oh, she texted him that whole thing, but he never got a reply, and it's like, for her, she spent the entire night worried that maybe Helen was the one that saw. Like, she hates just feeling like the other woman. It's like, I'm tired of being a cliche. You leave your wife or you don't. The fact is, she wants a new partner, someone that's going to have her back. She doesn't have to get caught up in all of this, and it's like, hey, I'm going to go, transfer somewhere else, so things aren't looking all good for Jackie and her, so that's going to be interesting. Another angle to this episode is this dude named Ray Brewer who comes to visit Jett. I love that even Maria's like, yeah, he's actually pretty damn handsome. He breaks down a lot about Bastic and kind of just like his exploits and just kind of how really good at what he does. It would have never crossed my mind that he's actually a lawyer. I just would have never gotten that vibe. Mobster, gangster, sure, but lawyer? That's a whole new level, but I guess that kind of feeds into how he does his thing, how he runs everything, so that's interesting. What's also interesting, we end up finding out Evans is his ex-brother-in-law. How did that circumstance work? I guess it's like once you're part of the family, there's just no leaving the family. It's like, yeah, he may have split from Basic's sister, but it's kind of like, hey, you're good, so maybe him and Basic have that type of relationship. I don't know. That was just kind of an interesting thing of like, never would have guessed that. So slowly unraveling his enterprise and understanding the connections between everything. But we also learn a little bit more about his connection to Charlie, because it turns out him and Charlie actually dated the same woman. She dated Charlie first, and then sometime later it was like this model who sadly ended up dying at some point later on, but it was like she ended up dating Bastic later on, and it turns out that ring that Charlie wanted stolen from him was connected to her. So we knew it had some kind of importance or whatever, but now we see it was about this particular woman, and maybe that's kind of where some of the bad blood between them potentially exists. For him, it's just kind of like she was with Bastic when she died, so it's a situation of, he would of course have that ring, and obviously she meant something to Charlie, so that was just kind of an interesting little, okay, so where is it going to go beyond that? I'm interested to kind of dive and see if there's even anything deeper, or is everything between them related to this woman? We'll see. It's also interesting, too, that Ray was kind of like, oh, yeah, let's, basically kind of asking Jett out on a date, which is interesting. She's like, yeah, maybe sometime. It's like, cool. So it's like, okay, that's interesting. But also we get to what I think is the wow of the episode, Bennie's side of things. Interesting. Rosalie ends up getting a new lock on her door and a gun. She's training herself with the gun. That night, her husband breaks in and tries to rape her, and she blows his brains out. we're not fully tell under the circumstances. Bennie comes in, he's like, okay, and she's like, who are you? And he's like, okay, we got to fix this situation. It's like, come on, you want chamomile? Like, I think he prepared chamomile tea for her or whatever. She's like, oh, I recognize you. You're the one that kidnapped me. He's like, yeah, I'm really sorry about that, because the whole, Felix situation. I'm like, oh yeah, I was the one that killed him. Not the circumstances I wanted it to be, but just the circumstances put me in that position. So, but he's helping her clean up the crime scene and stuff like that. It's like, yes. It's actually kind of interesting, because he talks about the reason why he's doing it is because he feels partly responsible. He's like, I shouldn't, just because of professionalism, I was doing the job I was hired for, so I shouldn't feel bad about it. I just did the job I was told to do. But the fact of the matter is, I put you in these circumstances when I kidnapped you, forced your husband to work with us, and that kind of sent him spiraling down this path and stuff. Doesn't justify what he did, but still, I feel responsible, because obviously the whole thing of because there's a whole complicated thing of she could take her chances with the cop, but she'd still go to jail for some time, because there would be the whole argument, well, was it really, sadly, it'd be that whole argument of, oh, was it really rape because he was your husband? Not saying husbands can't rape wives, but, in the eyes of the law, it would just, especially if a jury, it'd be a little harder probably to convince a jury, is kind of the whole point that Bennie was trying to make, and it's just a whole complicated thing. And it's also interesting because he's trying to teach her from this too. It's like, next time, be calm, cool, and collected. Basically, don't let your emotions kind of get the best of you. Don't let the adrenaline get the best of you. Like, you should have kind of thought things a little more through. But it's like, hey, not saying you didn't do the right thing. You defended yourself. You were 100% in that right to do it. But he's saying, next time, kind of be a little more calm and think things through. Don't be so rash. It's like, yeah, you gotta go in there and clean up the blood, and you're not gonna throw up. You know why? Because if you throw up, you're gonna clean it up. You have to clean that up too. And it was like, Bennie, because Bennie is always cool, calm, and collected. Even with changes in the plan and stuff like that. It's like, oh wait. He's like, yeah, I heard the gunshot. I thought you turned on yourself. It's like, wait, you heard it? Have you been following me? He's like, yeah, just to make sure you're okay. Once again, because he can kind of blame himself for everything. So it was kind of neat, them working together like that, and it that storyline is so weird. And then they're putting the body in the trunk, and he's like, it's okay if you faint, and literally 3 seconds later she faints, and he's like I said, everyone faints on their first time. Bringing her breakfast in the morning, everything, it's like, oh, I didn't know if you like coffee or tea, and here you go. And she's like, turn around, got the gun on him. He's like, what do we talk about, not being basically erratic? And she knocks him out. So it's like, okay, so that's definitely going to be interesting. I don't know, because understandably, it's because I was like, you're handling this well, especially knowing that he's the one that kidnapped you. It's like, you're kind of going with the flow. But to be fair, he's willing to help you clearing the crime scene. So it's like, of course, you're going to take advantage of that. I don't know if she's planning on killing Bennie afterwards, because once again, as he said it, it's like, I kind of feel responsible for setting everything in motion. Maybe she blames him too. But it's so weird, because it seems because obviously Bennie kind of has feelings for her. And like I said, if this ends up being a relationship, it's going to be quite a twisted relationship. I'm so curious to see what Rosalie's going to do. It's like, now that it's all been taken care of, she's probably going to run away. Maybe she won't kill him, because it's like, if I kill him, I'm just going to cause more problems. Maybe she's also getting the feeling like, oh, maybe he'll try to use this to blackmail me. But then maybe next episode we get a moment between Rosalie and him being like, no, I kind of like you, and maybe some romance but from it. I don't know. It's the storyline I can legitimately say, I'm very excited to see. I'm excited to see where everything else goes, but it's like, that's a storyline I'm like, I don't know where that's going, and I'm so excited to see where that one in particular goes. But it's going to be interesting to see what the next episode has in store for all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.